Dobar dan, gledate Kosovo Online podcast, ja sam Dragana Biberović. Moj današnji gost je Amerikanac koji je veći deo života proveo na Balkanu. Živeo je u Bugarskoj, Srbiji, Hrvatskoj, koju je odabrao za zemlju u kojoj će provesti svoje penzionerske dane. A u diplomatsku penziju otišao je iz Beograda sa mesta ambasadora 2004. godine. On je ujedno bio i poslednji američki ambasador u Jugoslaviji. Najzanimljivije detalje iz tog perioda svoje srpske karijere on je pretočio i u knjigu Kad ovacije utihnu, a jedno poglavlje u toj knjizi posvetio je i Kosovu. Upravo ćemo o tome, dakle o Kosovu, razgovarati danas. Moj gost je Vilijam Montgomeri. Hello, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the introduction.
And tell me, is it even necessary to wish you welcome since you often visit Belgrade?
I am often in Belgrade. I love Belgrade as a city and come back several times a year.
So is it necessary to wish you welcome, or it's fine as an often guest to say just thank you for being here?
You can say thank you. You can offer me a glass of wine later or something like that. But no, I'm very comfortable in Belgrade.
Okay, I'm glad. In the book I mentioned, you said that one of the main rules of American diplomacy is where you sit is where you stand. It means that someone's perspective is shaped by their environment. So tell me, since you've been living in Balkans for so many years or so many decades, do you consider yourself more of a Balkan than an American?
When I go back to America to visit, I realize how Balkanized I've become. Because from driving to the way here, I think people are more open in how they speak to each other. In a lot of ways, I've become Balkan. And I see from the reaction of Americans and when I'm driving or something else that I truly have become Balkan.
And now you are talking from position, very comfortable position of a retired ambassador. How does that differ from the situation and time when you were an active diplomat when it comes to current situation on Balkans and specifically in Kosovo?
Well, I should say that if you're going to have a good quality of life, you can never stop working. You can never stop being active. And so, yes, I retired 20 years ago, but I've remained very active in talking with individuals in countries, to writing, to living, to running, etc., to maintain my quality of life. It's the only way. If you don't do that, you die.
Are you as popular in Croatia as you are in Serbia?
The Croats are different than the Serbs. The Serbs are more open with their feelings, and they don't hesitate. A construction worker that's on a building, and I'm walking by, till today, will yell down, Montgomery, why did you do this? Why did you do that? They're very open. And the Croats are more reserved. And I think that's in part due to the influence of the Austrians when they were there. So they're more reserved. So they might notice me, but they really won't say anything. It's just a different approach. It doesn't mean there's hostility there, but it's just that I think the Serbs are more open.
Yes, but that doesn't mean you're not popular also in Croatia. And tell me, many of today's challenges in Kosovo, they are consequences of decisions made by West many years ago. Not all of decisions were good, all contrary. So from your point of view, what was the biggest mistake when it comes to Kosovo? You were ambassador from 2000 until 2004.
Correct.
Right after NATO bombing, in very specific moment, specific time when it comes to Kosovo. And tell me, what do you think now? What was the biggest mistake and decision when it comes to West and specifically America?
I think we're going to be talking for about 4 hours, so you should probably prepare the
So
listener.
you have 4 minutes to answer this question.
Well, we need to start with the fact that our country, America, is very proud of having a multicultural society. And it has its problems, but we think it's one of our major strengths. And unfortunately, we view that is the way that all countries should be. And so when it came to dealing with toppling the Iraqi government, to our actions in the Kosovo bombing, in Bosnia, our role in bringing about an end to the violence, the fundamental point that we emphasized in all three cases was the need to have a strong multicultural society. And what we didn't understand or accept is the countries, maybe all over the world, but certainly in this region, ethnicity is a major, major concern. It's a major cause of violence throughout the decades, throughout the centuries, and we didn't properly account for that. If I had to do it, I would have came to a solution that separated the ethnic groups rather than one that insisted that they stay together. And I think if you look now at the situation in Kosovo and in Bosnia, you will see that 25 or 30 years after the end to the fighting, the situations are still not resolved. They're not resolved because there wasn't this separation of ethnicities. And that's sort of a nasty thing to say to Americans because they believe so strongly the other way. But I think that's the fundamental cause of the problems.
Not only Americans strongly believe in multicultural society in Kosovo, that also that thinks in Albin Kurti, Prime Minister of Kosovo, who can believe when he says that Kosovo is an example of multicultural society and democratic society in Europe?
Well, we're coming into sort of the immediate issue. The immediate issue is that we did lead a bombing campaign on Kosovo. But after it was resolved, we've basically left it to the EU to sort of handle. And they have had a dialogue that's lasted how many years? 10, 15 years?
More than 10 years, yeah.
Which drives me totally crazy. Why? Because the EU only uses words. It doesn't have any teeth. So it's been very unsuccessful in this dialogue. And I think it's because they were given almost an impossible task, which is to create this multi-ethnic society. And what you see in the short term is you see Kurti doing terrible provocations against the Serbs, whether it's raising tariffs on goods, whether it's what he's done with the courts and stuff like that. Everything he's done is a massive provocation. The fact that the Albanian side agreed to the Community of Serbian Municipalities, I think it was 2013 or 2014.
Yes, 13 and 15.
And he refuses to implement that. And the EU just says, oh, we're so sorry. Oh, please, you should. They have no teeth. So they allow him to get away with doing stuff like that without any penalty at all, no teeth. And I think that's a problem. I think it's a problem of the EU, but it's also the problem that we handed the EU when we allowed the system to be established in Kosovo in the first place.
When we're talking about EU-facilitated dialogue, between Belgrade and Pristina. You recently said it has collapsed, and not only because of things like community of Serb municipality issue. So tell me, do you think that European Union is just ignoring problems or cannot help to achieve some solutions?
I think the European Union has a strong economy, one of the strongest in the world when put together. But it's never successfully established a political power that is equivalent to their economic power. Because they've got 27 different countries, I think it's 27, and each one has a veto over almost anything. So it's very difficult for them to act decisively. But again, we've thrown them this problem instead of dealing with it ourselves. So it's our fault. But to get back to the Kosovo situation, my view is that Kurti wants one of two things. He either wants to ethnically cleanse Serbs by making it so unpleasant to live there that there will be an exodus of Serbs. I think that to some extent is even happening now. But the other thing that he actually hopes for is to provoke your government into reacting against some of these things. So then, once again, the Kosovo Albanians can say, we're the victims, we need help, look what these Serbs are doing to us.
And what would be your advice for our government, for provocations?
Your government has behaved admirably because they have not allowed themselves to be provoked by this. But the thing of it is, it really is up to the European Union, and I would say the West, to do something about this problem. And I don't know that the EU has the strength of will in order to do it.
When you say West, many people think that a key role is the America, of course. And recently you said that Donald Trump can be the one who can reset the dialogue from zero. Why do you think so? What makes you think that?
I think, to be frank, the U.S. foreign policy community that exists now, people that are my age, even somewhat younger, got started around the same time, around 1990, when the Balkan War started to heat up in Croatia and Bosnia. They formed their impressions of this region and these countries at that time. And they fixed that impression in their minds, and they hold it to this day. And so at that time, they saw the Albanians as victims. So to this day, they still are thinking of them as victims. They saw Serbia as being an aggressor. So they've maintained those same mindsets for the 1990s. And that, by the way, includes President Biden. And I know this for sure. I know it because when the new government was formed after the fall of Milosevic, Biden came to visit. And he was totally arrogant with the new government, who was just trying to get established, knew a change. And he insisted, you must instantaneously denounce this, that, the other thing that Milosevic did. You must be very strong, in a very arrogant way. And so he, again, is one of those people who has maintained the same attitude that he had around 1991, 92, et cetera. And so my hope with Trump is that he doesn't belong to that school and that past. He doesn't have those formed opinions. He might choose to do something differently. I don't know. I've had no contact with Trump or any of his people, but I would say that something needs to be done bring these things to closure. Because we just can't have Kosovo and Bosnia being two third-class citizens, Bosnia being sort of ruled by a colonial governor or not ruled at all, and Kosovo in a situation that could lead to violence at any moment. We've got to break out of this situation, and we've got to be willing to look at radical solutions. So that's my very strong opinion.
You said you don't know what will be the next move when it comes to Donald Trump. Is that the most important thing about him, that we don't know what is his next move?
Nobody knows. He does some crazy things, like saying, I want to buy Greenland. I want to have Canada be the 51st state, etc. So
what can he say so crazy about Kosovo?
Nothing. As far as I know, he hasn't said anything crazy. He hasn't done anything crazy. But he has his own way, whether it's using sort of a chainsaw to destroy parts of our government that he thinks that there's too many people in, to putting tariffs on our best friends. So he can do a lot of things, and I don't know what his approach will be. We can see what his approach is on Ukraine, which is far different than previous administrations and far different from how the European countries see it. So, and he's taking a radical different approach there. I don't know what he'll do about Kosovo.
So while we're waiting for his next moves, we can talk about current situation. What do you think about current situation on Kosovo? Is it dangerous as it seems?
Yes, it is. It's very dangerous because, as I said, Kurti wants, I think, to either ethnically cleanse the Serbs from Kosovo or provoke Serbia.
Are Serbs the only ones who have reasons for fear?
Well, in Kosovo, I think more than 90% of the population is Albanian.
We don't have exact data, but yeah, we can guess that most of them are Albanians. Yes.
And I think the percentage of Serbs has steadily and slowly decreased.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And I think we need to find a solution to that.
And tell me, if you were an ambassador today, what would you make a priority in the dialogue? What would be your move to have success in the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina?
I would stop the dialogue. I would stop the dialogue.
And what would be the other solution?
Insist on steps being taken to correct the situation. Insist. It wouldn't be a dialogue. I would insist that things be done. I could not do that as ambassador, but the President of the United States could do that. We're providing all sorts of assistance and support to Kosovo, whether it's our votes in the UN, whether it's financial assistance, whether it's having some troops stationed there. There's a lot of things we could do to insist that things happen. In the short term, to establish the community of Serbian municipalities, to fulfill all the applications, all the promises made in the previous dialogues that have never been fulfilled. We could insist on that. So I would not have a dialogue anymore. I would just insist that those things be done. And I would have the dialogue, if I could, changed to be something directed by the United States of America and not the European Union. Because in more than 20 years, they've shown they're incapable of taking any concrete steps to put in place what they want.
But it seems that nowadays actors like European Union or America are not insisting enough, because we hear all the time, we insist Belgrade do this, we insist Pristina do that, but there are no results. So maybe it's not strategy good enough.
Words are not enough. That's what the EU does. What the EU does is, first of all, have words. Second of all, say, well, if someday you want to get in that EU, you will do this and that and that. But is there anybody in Serbia today that thinks that in the near future, Serbia is going to be in the EU? The answer is no. So the soft power promise or threat of EU membership no longer has any meaning. And that's, again, why steps need to be taken that are concrete steps to cause pain.
Steps like what?
Well, for example, in Kosovo, I would stop any of our assistance to the Kosovo government. I would reflect on, do we need troops there, or what is our mission? I would reflect on the UN, and are we going to continue to always support Kosovo and Kosovo's status in the UN? I would consider steps like that. And I would make the Kosovo Albanians aware that these are various serious steps.
So you would stick to the rule of law and resolution 1244?
1244 was never followed. Look at resolution 1244. Resolution 1244 calls, first of all, it recognizes the sovereignty of Yugoslavia. Secondly, it calls at a future time for security forces from Serbia to come to safeguard the cultural monuments and monasteries in Kosovo. It calls for that. Those things were never done. Sovereignty of Yugoslavia was not respected, and no Serbian forces have been allowed back in.
Yes, but Serbia asked that for 2 times, I think.
And but that's
rejected.
My whole point. So don't look to 1244, because our tendency, and whether it's Security Council Resolution 1244 on Kosovo, or whether it's the Dayton Accords, we choose to only respect the parts of those agreements we want to.
Okay, and tell me when it comes to your solutions or some other kind of negotiations. We know that you are very familiar with the current situation here in this region. You know main political actors. If you had a chance to make a team, who would represent Belgrade and who would represent Pristina in negotiations, if your main goal would be a success, of course?
You have to work with the people who are the political leaders of these places. So that would be your government and the Kosovo Albanian government in Kosovo. You have to work with them and put it to them. And again, I would not have a dialogue. I would have directives, talk about some other issues and how to work them out. But it would not be a simple dialogue that either side could simply ignore.
So you would ask political leaders to deliver results?
Yes.
Only that?
I would insist that they deliver the results, not ask. All that's been done for more than 20 years by the European Union is to ask. And they're being asked to do things that we, the United States, put in place more than 20 years ago and left to the Europeans to handle. So we're at fault for putting these things in place in the first place, the EU for being unable to carry them out.
We know the official U.S. vision of Kosovo when it comes to status of Kosovo, of course, but you argue that no options should be ruled out when it comes to the final status because we don't know how will things going on the ground and what can happen. So tell me now, can you say, are there any propositions from the past that can be restored or any new solutions when it comes to final status of Kosovo?
We're getting into a lot of speculation, and I'm not sure that I want to go there because it really is all speculation, and a lot will depend on the initial reaction of the parties when we insist that they take certain steps. And I wouldn't rule out anything. So. You
cannot answer this question.
No, because it gets into real speculation. And if we took a really, really firm position, for example, with Kurti, to end his provocations, to restore certain benefits, etc., how he and his government would respond. A lot would depend on things like that. There's so many unknowns. It's hard to get into.
And now, when you see things from other perspective, could you have predicted that the situation would turn out that it has today?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
At what time you could predict the situation? The time when you were ambassador or many years later?
Well, I mean, first of all, I've got quite a history with Kosovo because in 1991, 1992, as chief of staff for the Deputy Secretary of State and then the Secretary, Larry Eagleburger. And he was the point person for our handling at that time of the question. And what is very interesting is that all this fighting was going on in Bosnia and Croatia. But we were always focused on Kosovo. Why? Because as bad as it was in Bosnia and Croatia, and it was horrible, it was horrific, the fighting was totally contained to those two places, nowhere else. But if you look at Kosovo, if fighting started there, look at its history. There's all sorts of neighbors who could have been drawn into that from outside the borders of Yugoslavia. I mean, if you look at history, Bulgaria, Macedonia, Montenegro, even Greece could have become involved because all of them in the past 100 years have had interest in Kosovo. So this war could have spread greatly. So we were always focused on Kosovo. So I will show you as a present a first page of a cable.
Sorry, first page of?
A cable
okay.
That came into the State Department in 1992 from our embassy in Belgrade. And it was, again, in 1992, it was about the situation in Kosovo. It was right when all the violence was going on in Bosnia and Croatia. And my job was to screen all the incoming cables, decide which ones the Deputy Secretary should see, highlight them in yellow, the key sentences. And sometimes I would write something on top. So again, this is from 1992. This is the first page. It's about the Kosovo situation. And I wrote at the top, Kosovo, a major problem for the Clinton administration, a wonderful excuse for the Bush administration to avoid action on Bosnia. And Eagleburger wrote back to me, I've had enough of this, knock it off. That's where we were in 1992. So we've been following the situation since then. When I was there with Eagleburger, we had several meetings with Rugova to encourage him to remain peaceful. And we tried to get Milosevic to change some of his practices. Because as you know, in 1990, he withdrew the autonomous status of Kosovo. He forbid the Albanian language in the major TV and newspaper stations, wouldn't allow Albanian classes in schools. And as a result of that, the Kosovo Albanians withdrew their children from the schools. And so it was a very, very, very difficult situation. And we were trying to get Rugova to remain peaceful, and he did. But we also, as you probably know, issued a Christmas warning in 1992 that I helped draft. Egelberger was going to go over and see Milosevic and tell him to treat the Albanians better. But at the last minute, he was ill, he couldn't go. So we sent a unique message, and I think it's publicly available now, I think. But we instructed our ambassador here to go in, ask for a meeting with Milosevic, to see him one-on-one, to not say anything to him at all, and to hand him a piece of paper. And on the paper, which had no other imprints or anything, it said, if there is any violence in Kosovo, the United States of America will use anything needed, including military force, to stop it. And to hand this to Milosevic and just leave the room with no speculation, no comment. And he did so. And in fact, there wasn't any violence for...
But we had military action in Serbia and in Kosovo.
You didn't...
Many years later, of course,
well, that's
but
the point.
It happened. Yeah.
That's the point. After that administration left, then around 1993, 1994, a couple of years later, the KLA came on the scene because they were fed up with the lack of action with Rugova in control. And so they set up the KLA, which became a guerrilla warfare situation. And
you said that American administration asked Milosevic to treat Albanians better at that time, but nowadays I guess that you would ask Kurti to treat Serbs better. And tell me, with ongoing tensions and many young Serbs leave Kosovo these days, and many Serbs, not only young people, because of insecurity, lack of opportunities. Do you see a future where Kosovo Serbs could live in peace?
as part of...
as part of Kosovo society, of course.
I think it would be
with the Albanians as neighbors.
I think it would be... Sorry, I think it's extremely difficult. Because their welfare will totally depend upon the whims of the Albanian government. And if you have a guy like Kurti, their welfare isn't assured. They would need to have another type of government. And I think it's very uncertain, the Serbs to have to rely on who is going to be the next president, whether they are secure or not. So it's I think a very bad situation.
So you don't see good future for Serbs in Kosovo at all?
I'm not saying the Serbs should move in Kosovo, but I think things need to change in Kosovo. And I am not saying this is necessarily the best solution, but I would consider a division of Kosovo.
Can we go a few steps back? For example, Serbia is asking for status quo ante. For example, to go to the situation as it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Is that possible? If it's not possible to go 30 years back, can we go 2 or 3 years back and preserve basic rights for Serbs?
I think that anything that depends on the promises of the Kosovo Albanian government cannot really be trusted as we see with Kurti, he has not treated the Serbs well, and that's the reality. And so any Albanian government can choose to be good or bad, and that's a very unstable situation for the Kosovo Serbs. And I think they need a lot of support to survive. I think that they have been in Kosovo for more than 800 years, and it would be a shame to see them all have to leave.
And you mentioned Kurti's government. We will have new government on Kosovo. Among many crises, now we have post-election crisis. Who do you see in the new government, and should Serbs participate in it?
Well, I think they should participate in it if they have a chance. I don't know who will form the new government, but
no one knows.
Nobody knows. But I think it's always a mistake, always to boycott an election, always. So I
they participated in these elections.
Yes,
yes.
But also if asked, it'd be a mistake for them not to be a voice in the government, as long as they could be an active voice and it wasn't doing anything against their interests. I think they should look at doing that.
Can they make a difference when it comes to the position of Serbs if they participate in the government?
Well, let's step back a little bit. As you know, the government in Albania or in Kosovo called for new elections in the north, and the Serbs boycotted those elections. So what happened? Because they boycotted the elections,
they took over municipalities with Serbs. Yes,
exactly, and so.
But we're talking about central government. It's not the same situation here. Serbs have been in the government earlier. But in the last one with Albin Kurti, no, I guess they won't be in the government if Albin Kurti stays as prime minister.
I think this is sort of almost irrelevant. I mean, if they were in the government and could be an active voice and insist on certain measures and reject others, it may be helpful. But if things are happening that are contrary to Serbian interests, they can do nothing about it. That's something else again. But I really have seen in Serbia boycotts of elections, and it's always a mistake. Always.
And when it comes to U.S. ambassadors in this region, you're often seen as some of the most powerful political figures. Because of that, your image appears in the final episode of the TV series Sablja. Have you had the chance to see the series, and what do you think about it?
I think it's a wonderful production by Cheddar Ivanovic and Beba Popovic. They've done a beautiful job in making themselves the heroes of Operation Sabre, and it infuriates me. And no, I never had a scene like that with that group
of course,
people.
But it's an artistic interpretation, not a documentary.
Yeah, but this is horrible, because young people now, they watch that series. I don't care what it says at the beginning, that this is just an interpretation. That's the image that they're going to have of what happened. And that's what makes me extremely angry, because it is a total distortion. As Zoran Živković pointed out in his commentary about it, which was right on target.
So you didn't like the series and your role in it?
My role was minor and wrong, but I just liked the whole theme because it left out so many important factors and again, just played up Cheda and Beba.
The series is about Zoran Đinđić, his life and murder. Your relationship with him is a prominent theme in the book I mentioned in the introduction. Tell me, do you still write today? Are you perhaps documenting your time in Croatia?
Well, I am writing a new book right now. I've completed a draft of it, and it's going to be about my diplomatic life. And it'll be a chapter on each post I was at, beginning with the first one in Belgrade in 1975 and going into my last one, which was Belgrade, and leaving in 2004. And my wife, Lynn, after the end of my commentary on each section, will write her views about her experiences at the same time. So we've done the draft, and now we are hoping that it'll be published.
If I understood well, you're writing about not only Serbia, but your career in Bulgaria, in Croatia, meanwhile in Washington, right?
Every single step of the way, including my times as Chief of Staff or the Deputy Secretary and Secretary, being in Dar es Salaam, all these places. Every place has its own chapter. But the truth is that as time went on, the chapters kept getting longer and longer. So when I came to the last two chapters, being Croatia and then Serbia, they're the longest chapters by far, because maybe it's more familiar to me, but also because that's when it really mattered. Some of my other earlier assignments, in fact, I was a junior officer at times, so I was more an observer. For example, when I was in Moscow, I was very early in my career, and so I observed what was going on. I observed how living in Moscow was for 3 years, in 1979 to 81. But I wasn't an active participant so much. Only later in my career, when I rose up the ranks, was I active, and that's why the chapters got longer.
And tell me, do you expect the other book to be as popular as this one? For example, this is very hard to find these days. I had to borrow my example from my editor-in-chief.
Oh.
You gave him this one as a present.
I did.
So do you expect the other one to be as popular as this one?
I don't know. I would say that the two places where there might be some interest in it is Croatia and Serbia, because that's when it's most relevant. But again, this was all 20 years ago, and so maybe they won't consider it as relevant now as then.
So after publishing that book, I hope there will be another chance for you to come here and talk to us.
And if that happens, I will give you an autographed copy of my new book. You won't have to borrow one.
Okay, thank you very much and looking forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
A hvala vama što ste nas danas gledali. Današnji gost našeg podcasta bio je nekadašnji američki ambasador u Beogradu, Vilijam Montgomeri.